Welcome to Making Pondo and Talking Pondo. Talking Pondo is a podcast where we pick out two movies each week and talk about them in detail. Making Pondo is a podcast where we talk to people we've made films with and we discuss all their experiences on set.
All right, we're back again. What's going on, Marty?
Back with episode 8.
Episode Ocho. On the Ocho this week.
Of Talking Pondo.
That's right.
It might be confusing to you, it might be interesting to you, you might not care at all, but we're here to explain it. It's episode 8 of Talking, but it might be episode like 14 if you count them all together, right? Because,
Right.
the other program, Making Pondo, where we talk to people we've made movies with, we don't really have a number on that one because, quite frankly, we don't know what number we're putting them out in, right? To peel the curtain back a little bit, because they're all kind of, evergreen conversations. We feel like you could listen to them in any order. Hell, you could listen to these in any order, but you wouldn't get the nice little cliffhanger at the end where we tell each other what movie you're watching next week.
That's true.
But what movies did we tell each other we were watching next week last week?
So next week, last week, that's a good way to put it. You gave me When Harry Met Sally.
Yes.
And I gave you Everything Everywhere All at Once, the darling of the Oscars from 2022.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. Both. I think New Year's type pictures. Definitely Harry Met Sally.
They both hit New Year's. There's New Year's mentions and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
It's true.
Which is our first Best Picture winner that we've ever covered on the program, I think, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, yeah.
I mean, we've probably covered other movies that might have had some nominations, perhaps, but I don't think we've ever had a Best Picture winner or nominee on Talking yet. So, no, it's the first.
Yeah. I guess we can dive into that one first if you want.
You want to do that one first?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Well, okay, why not? We've already started anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is Everything Everywhere All at Once about? What is this movie?
So it's a hard movie to explain, in my opinion, in detail, right?
Mm-hmm.
But basically, it's about a woman who owns a laundromat with her husband, and they're both kind of. He's basically on the verge of divorcing her. She's
a lot of spoilers here, guys.
Yeah, a lot of spoilers. They're both in debt to the IRS, and it looks like the IRS is either going to close their business or whatever. And one day, her husband suddenly turns into somebody else who claims to be from an alternate universe, basically a parallel universe where they have created this woman, I can't remember her name, the Chinese woman's character. It's played by Michelle Yao. Evelyn.
Yeah.
So Evelyn has, in another universe or alternate universe, created a thing that allows her to jump between universes, and that's kind of the plot of that's the basic plot of the movie. I don't want to get into super detail about it, but yeah, from there, she's got to go find Jobu, right? Because the multiverse is being threatened by Jobu, whose mind was splintered because they were trying to make her verse jump or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird movie. It's got a weird plot, but I don't know. It was probably the most creative thing I saw in 2022.
Yeah, there's not another movie like this in existence. And because of its technical marvel, I feel is why it won Best Picture. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be something I will revisit in 5 years plus, or maybe anybody else will.
Right.
But what it does is very much like The Abyss. It exists to push things forward, because one of my main notes is this movie is simultaneously funny, exciting, and sad,
Yeah.
which I've never experienced all at once while watching a movie.
Yeah. It really
So
fires on a lot of
that's
different
new.
emotional levels.
That
Yeah.
is new.
Yeah. Um, I, what blew me away more than anything was just the entire creativity of the movie. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you're never going to see another one like it. Like that movie is a singular
Yeah.
piece of film. You go and watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of the Madness,
Which I
and
still haven't seen.
well, maybe we'll get to it one of these days. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, the way that everything everywhere plays with this idea of alternate universes is completely different than anything you've really ever seen any other alternate reality type
Oh
movie
yeah.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So in I think it was 1984, might have been 1985. uh, Stephen King and Peter Straub wrote a book together. And you may be familiar with this
yeah,
book. It's called The
sure.
Talisman.
Yeah, the Talisman. Mm-hmm.
And this is the closest thing to that we've seen on film, which gives me hope that maybe that can finally be turned into the thing that it was supposed to, because
Mm-hmm.
that's all about flipping back and forth between the different realities.
Right.
Uh, Uh, I never saw, what was it called, the Tenth Kingdom or something like that. Wasn't that one of these other like mirror universe
Hmm.
type? There's a lot of
Yeah,
stories about,
we might have to.
you
Might
know,
have to check.
a
Might
lot
have
of
to
them are
check that
about
one out.
two dimensions though. This is like multi dimensions.
Yeah,
I never
that's
read Black House, the sequel to The Talisman. Now I'm even more curious about
mm,
it. Because that was all about, what was the character's name, Jack, and
mm-hmm.
his mother
Oh,
was ill or something.
it's
He
been
had to
since high
go,
school. I read that book.
yeah,
Yeah.
go to that other dimension where it was basically him, but it was all like this, medieval type world.
Mm-hmm.
I remember at the end of it, he's describing in the book how he's walking up the stairs. At least I think this is how it went. And he's like flipping between all the different realities at once. And he's in each place at the same time. And it's just like, oh, wow, they finally, all these years later, like 40 years later, that kind of concept finds its way onto the screen. So
Mm-hmm.
pretty
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Yeah.
It really was.
Hmm.
I can see why they handed out so many Best Actor Oscars too. Um,
Oh yeah, because they
um,
have to juggle so much.
yeah, I thought Michelle Yeoh was brilliant, and I thought Jamie Lee Curtis was pretty brilliant.
Hmm.
The hot dog fingers still makes me like every time I see that image in my head, I start laughing because
Hmm.
it's just like this is who in the hell thought of that?
And the having to sync it. Oh yeah, right. All the absurd shit, and then having to
Yeah,
sync it all together. Is the technical marvel of having all these shots.
yeah,
Connect and match with each other. I'm sure computers help, but still, you still have to make it happen. This is one of my. It's not one of my notes, but I'm glad you reminded me of it. Is I think a lot of the movie's strength lies in it is a study of the human face. There's so many close-ups in the
yeah,
movie, and you can
yeah,
project so many emotions onto that,
yeah,
that I think that's really hitting that with what did I write here? If it was just a single story about the person running the laundromat, it's kind of uninteresting, right? But
mm-hmm.
when you add a whole bunch of other kind of uninteresting on their own stories together, you have something you could teach in film school at that point, right? Where you're building upon all of it to essentially tell the single story of this laundromat, which in my interpretation is the only thing that was really happening the whole time anyway. That you can interpret all of this as this, coping mechanism made up thing to get us
Uh-huh.
to the end of it. But when you combine all those things, they work together. Kind of like, what was it? Was it the yellow book that we would call, or the orange book? Yeah, that old film book that we used to read. That would
um,
we'd refer back to it personally sometimes. I think we call it the orange book. That's not
I
the
think you're
title of
right.
the book, I don't
Yeah,
think.
the
Uh,
Orange Book.
didn't it say something like, it had a section like, this is an idea, not a movie, or something like that? And
Right.
Oh, I
Right.
have a great idea for a movie. Somebody will tell you, and it's just a line of something. And you're like, well, that's just more of
A
a
scene.
scene that could
Yeah. A
happen.
couple pages or something. Yeah.
This is like they figured out, and this is why the movie works. It's why it was a success. Is why it hit all four quadrants, in my opinion, so well.
Hmm.
Is because it has that single universal story as its basis that is so universal that almost any viewer can identify with it. So much like you were talking about in a completely other conversation, you can kind of hang things on this framework, right, as the story just kind of goes along, and it allows them to go completely fucking ape shit in this movie. Oh, one of the companies was Hot Dog Hands LLC at the end
Yeah.
of the credits.
That's
So,
fantastic. See,
yeah.
I see. I think the movie. I think what I mean. You got all this multiverse stuff, and it's a very twisty and bendy, and it's a visual treat to watch the movie. It's a really the movie does not slow down for you, and it's really constantly doing something pretty interesting or innovative. But under all that is just kind of a story about a family breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's just like it's a story about a family just breaking down, and one guy trying to convince his wife to break out of this grudge that she's in, I guess, this total drudge of her life,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Well,
daughter too.
well, you know what it is? It's La La Land as an action movie. Or meets the Matrix, right? You know, you have this basic story, but it's all this extravagant way of telling it, which is through the imagination. And I almost feel like, oh, is this kind of we're going to look back as the 20s of movies like this and Violent Night and think, oh, that's kind of like the style of movies of the 20s of their kind of bizarre actiony, hyper where are we 40 years after the MTV generation of quick cuts?
Yeah, yeah. I liked the everything bagel, the black coal
Right,
everything
right.
bagel. Uh,
It's a food movie too. See,
it is hot dog buns, everything
hmm
bagels, and it's yeah.
and much like Get Crazy, you know what it had in common with Get Crazy?
What?
Dog abuse.
Dog
Woo! We
abuse.
see that little
Oh,
dog go flying, and I'm like, hey,
that's
that's like
right.
when the dog got kicked and Get Crazy.
I
I don't
completely
think any
forgot about that.
dogs were actually harmed in any of these movies. These are obviously, fake stuffed animals flying through the air in these films, but very
Debbie
odd.
the dog, yeah, the dog
Here
mommy,
we got
yeah.
dogs flying, and next week, UHF, we're going to make poodles learn how to fly.
um, it was nice to see Short Round again. Is it Ki Hui Kwan? I think his name is.
Right.
I'll probably massacred that. I apologize, but I think that's his name, but or that's how you pronounce it at least. But yeah, he was it was good, and he's a good actor. I mean, he was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, and I see he's getting other work because of that. So that's great.
Oh, yeah.
But it was good to see him again. It was really nice to. I don't know. It was like seeing an old friend. Like, where have you been?
Mm-hmm. And to, let me verify a little IMDb check here. I would like to see all cast and crew. Thank you very much. If I can't show you this on a podcast, I can at least narrate what I am doing. So when I saw James Hong show up a few minutes into the movie, it was like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, now
yeah.
we've already got multiple John Carpenter cast members throughout the years showing up in this movie with Jamie Lee Curtis and now
Mm-hmm.
James Hong. It's your Halloween Big Trouble in Little China mashup you've always wanted, but never got. Never knew you wanted. Where Jamie Lee Curtis gets to be the pseudo slasher a few times, with the big knife elements, implements, I should say, and trying to whack people in the head. And I still have quite a few notes on this one.
Apparently, Randy Newman was the voice of Raccacoonie, which is the Ratatouille ripoff.
See, by itself, you'd be like, okay, but when you layer that with a bunch of other crazy ones, you get away with it.
Yep,
Right.
you definitely do.
I just finished watching the movie before the podcast. This is one where it's like I should have had a day or two to sit with this one. So I'm trying to cram in as much shit as I can remember from it.
Try to process, yeah.
It reminded me of a bunch of movies, right? Uh, you got your little bit of your Matrix thing in there, and once again, like Sisu or Violent Night, you seem to be handing me these movies that are like conglomerates of the 20th century. Like I said, this is like La La Land crashed into the Matrix, and now it's like two ideas that shouldn't go together, but they do somehow. Somebody decided they go together. I never saw the
you got your
movie.
chocolate and my peanut butter.
Yeah, I never saw the movie Sliding Doors, but I imagine there's something with that. Isn't that like multi-life Gwyneth Paltrow thing? Or
I didn't see it either.
well, write in people and tell us we have no idea what we're talking.
Tell us about other multiverse movies that we should be watching and reviewing.
You know what it really reminded me of is that MST episode Fire Maidens of Outer Space, where Timmy shows up, the alternate crow who doesn't talk,
Uh-huh.
and then Joel has those control joysticks, and he's all, you can control the pitch and the yaw, you can control the lights, and it does. And then Timmy grabs him, and he's all, no, Timmy, no, stop it. And when they turn the lights back on, he's suddenly like in a clown suit with Tom Servos on a skewer, he's cooking them. And they're still having the conversation because
Right.
Timmy's messing up everything. He's screwing up all the time continuum multiverse. And I was like, oh, it's like, Timmy, no, stop doing that. Stop sending us in the weird Google Eye hot dog finger world,
Well, the thing I liked about it was that it's, and of course, I'm sure 20 years from now, once people have lived with these type of movies, because these multiverse movies are out there. They're this idea of alternate realities and is coming up more frequently in movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think it's going to be, it's like the time travel movies now. Like we're like, wait, back, there's that one movie where it's like, wait, Back to the Future is impossible. And they're like, no, Back to the Future is impossible. When you go back in time, you create a whole new timeline. You don't just go back in time to your own timeline. That's not how it works, And so it's like that where I'm wondering where it's like people are going to watch this 20 years from now. Like, oh, that's a terrible representation of a multiverse, but I thought it was pretty cool, especially the way its own internal logic kind of worked pretty well.
Mm-hmm. At one point, I heard the music from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia being played.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. It also reminded me of that episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where we find out she's in an insane asylum and it's all been going on in her head.
Right. Yeah.
Or
yeah.
has it? A little bit of Quantum Leap. Because you're jumping from body to body, not so much sliders, but more of the Quantum Leap.
Yeah, absolutely.
I Heart Huckabees a little bit because that whole movie is they're talking about, time and space and existence between, what if you're in a space between the space? But I'm not talking about those spaces. I'm talking about the space between the space between the space. Oh, but see, but you forget to mention you were in this space. Blah, blah, blah. I want you to put your legs up and down at the same time. I'm trying to help you. A little deep cut. Yeah.
If you have not seen that outtake, by the way, just on a personal note,
people,
you want to go. You really want to go watch Lily Tomlin and that director go at it off camera. It's pretty funny. The funniest thing is watching Dustin Hoffman slowly inch his way off of camera. He's just slowly just walking to the left and exiting off camera. It's fucking hilarious.
One of those YouTube clips I think about every 6 months or so. It's popping into my head.
Boy, that's funny.
What Dreams May Come had a little bit of that in there. It's a better movie than that. I can't watch that again. It's way too depressing.
Yeah.
do a whole series of the depressing Robin Williams films. Uh, and here's one, and most people don't like this movie, Vanilla Sky.
No,
Do you
I don't
think
like
it?
that movie.
Do you think it? But do you think it had a similar tone of? I mean, it's obviously not as frantic, but it's more of that kind of you're here, and it's because of this, and then he's having the pop
Yeah.
culture imagery, and
It's the way it was shot. You know, like you said, it's a bunch of it's a lot of close-ups. You know, I mean, and of course, you know, there's your it's also a kung fu movie. You know, you've
mm-hmm.
got a whole, you know, weird kung fu thing going on in there too. Um,
It reminded me of the Michael Jackson black or white video. Remember when it's all the people's faces and they're all just morphing
yeah,
into each other,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I was like, what does this remind me of? I'm like, it's that video.
It's that video.
Like they
Yeah,
took that and they made a feature length out of that concept of, but it works because, like I was saying, the human face, you can
yeah,
project onto it. One of my old bosses in retail would tell me, you don't put this price sticker over the people's faces because the face sells the product. That's why you see the face on an album cover or a movie poster so much, because people see the face and they relate to it for some reason. Or
hmm.
what is it? What do they say in The Simpsons? Staring at me with their dead eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, I think, and I don't. Who? What? That wasn't an A24 film, was it?
Yeah, it was.
It was,
Yeah.
which which means that it was probably a relatively low budget.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Because they had a bunch of different locations, but some of them were quickly used, so it could probably be done with some sort of background instead, I'm guessing. And what was the main location, like the IRS building and the house or the laundromat?
Yeah,
So, from that
yeah,
perspective, I could see how that would keep the cost down because it's all about the effects. Looking
yeah,
briefly, apparently it was a bunch of people that never did effects before, but they had all been working with each other and they just decided to make this thing. Isn't that how something weird like this sprouts out?
yeah,
It's
yeah. Well,
it's
people,
off the
it's.
grid.
I mean, if you listen to, there's an interview with Orson Welles where they ask him like, you know, how did you do this with Citizen Kane? How'd you do that? And he goes, I just told people what I wanted and they told me it wasn't possible. And then we just
Mm-hmm.
figured it out. You know, he's like, he basically said, I was so dumb about what was or wasn't possible that I would just, you know, I had the balls to ask for things that weren't possible. And then they would
Mm-hmm.
go around trying to make it possible, you know, and a lot of
Yeah,
times it worked.
yeah.
Um, you know, this was a $14 million film that grossed $143 million.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, you said the visual effects were all done by 9 people,
Yeah,
including the 2 directors,
yeah.
and
Wow.
the core of them were done by 5 people, and none of the
Mm-hmm.
VFX team went to school for
Yeah.
VFX.
So
Yeah,
you had some microphone drop. Whatever you think about the movie itself, you can't deny that technical marvel of it.
yeah, they were all friends who taught themselves with tutorials they found online for free. So, Jesus.
And like my only critiques of the film are from my own taste or things that you go, well, yeah, but if you change that, you ruin more of the almost James Cameron vagueness of it to where it'll appeal to everybody if you start altering some of these things. Like I wrote, she's basically, what's it? She's basically omnipotent, right? She's Captain Marvel in a way. And so, about halfway through the movie, well, let me preface this. It takes about 45 minutes to get going.
Yeah, it's a long movie.
For a while there, I was
It is a
sitting there
long movie.
going, okay, I'm going to stick with it. But it's, because I've watched a lot of movies where I was like, I don't care for this. And then by the time I get to the end of it, I really like it, right? And I go
Uh-huh.
back and it's changed the beginning for me.
Sure, 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 sure.
This one was a bit of a slog to finally, for me anyways, to get up and going. Uh, it takes about 45 minutes to get there. And once it finally gets there, it achieves those moments of of things that we've never seen or felt before in
Mhm.
cinema, which is where I'm like, okay, well, you've done that alone. You don't need to do anything else, movie. You've kind of done it all. So anything
Right.
left that I have to say is kind of null and void at this point. But we got a podcast to fill, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. That then I realize, well, shit. If she's basically Captain Marvel, there's uh, what did I write? There's what does that say? Oh wow, I can't
Can't
read
read
my
your own
own note.
handwriting.
No, I can't even read what that
I have
says.
that problem
But
myself.
it's like basically there becomes no stakes at that point where I'm like, okay, it's still gonna be able to emotionally manipulate me a few times because it's that well made of a movie. But I go, well, obviously, if she can do the most absurd fucking things, what she can just think of whatever and it'll happen, then she's unbeatable, right? It would be like I can roll a 20 every time. But see, if that wasn't there, you don't have the movie. And
Right.
also, it ties into my theory of, oh, this was all. None of this was happening. She was just in the laundromat with a baseball bat because she was
It's
irritated at seeing Google eyes everywhere.
it's the grease, the theory, the grease theory, where you've heard that, right? The
Hmm.
theory of the alternate theory of grease. There's a theory of grease running
Oh
out there.
yeah, where they're dead.
Basically says that, yeah, well, Sandy's dead. She's dying.
That's so
She's drowning
morbid.
in the ocean, and Danny Zuko is just a dude that she saw on the beach that she wanted to meet. And so as she's drowning in the ocean and she's having her last moments or whatever, she's this is what's going through her head.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they point to the fact that the car takes off into the clouds at the end of the movie as a like she's dying, she's going to heaven, she's ascending or whatever. I thought this was
Mm-hmm.
funny. Anyway.
Uh, my other critiques were, and this is just for me,
Mhm.
because I'm, as the time of this recording, 49 years old. Maybe I do realize that not everything is made for me. I do enjoy the film, but like I said, it's not something I'm going to be putting on again. Uh, do you remember the movie Domino?
Yeah, sure.
Now
Yeah,
that was
with what's her name? Yeah.
Yeah, right. That was about 20 years ago or so, right? Jeez, has it really been that long?
Yeah,
I
I
think it
think actually
has.
that's about 2000,
Yeah.
2001, if I remember correctly.
Now, not saying that this movie had this effect on me. Everything, Everywhere at Once did not do this to me, but Domino was the first movie that made my eye twitch. It had so much going on and light, and it would never sit still for more. I remember it just constantly moving
That's
to where to get through the
a
last part
frenetic
of it, I
movie.
had to hold my hand over my eye like this to get
Uh,
through it because my eye would not stop twitching. The only
yeah.
thing that reminded me of is when in film school when cutting the Super 8 on that little handheld thing that you look through, that would start to fuck my eyes up too. Maybe it's a good thing that I was just in the age of video because obviously that
Hmm.
film equipment was screwing with me. Or I could
Interesting.
have gotten somebody else to edit way back then. Tune in to Making Pondo for more
Interesting.
about it.
Hmm.
But yeah,
I,
uh,
I
I
I do
like
think
the
it's a
movie, but there's
frenetic
too
movie.
much movement in it for me. It's
Uh-huh.
too frantic. But it's not for
It's,
me in that
it's
respect.
a
And
really
I understand what it's doing, but it's a difficult watch for me, especially in one sitting.
yeah. I mean that's a trend. A lot there's movies out there that just they constantly move. The camera never
Mhm.
rests, and I mean I don't see that as
What do
necessarily a
I
bad
know? It won Best
thing.
Picture, right?
But when you're whipping the camera around and you're doing quick cuts and things in the middle of that, it can get pretty busy.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So
I thought it was hyper yet slow, which was
mhm.
weird.
Yeah, it took a long. It did.
Because
What was it?
sometimes it'll just
Two
go
hours
off
and
and
20, 2 hours and 15,
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
because it's like another one of my notes. Any excuse to be weird.
Mhm.
And so it's
Yeah.
like you're going to have these sequences that it's like, well, we got to have the pinky sequence, and we're gonna,
Yeah.
and that's why the movie's so long
Yeah.
because and it's also kind of why the movie's good because
Yeah.
they didn't have somebody
It's
telling them not to go all the
some of
way. We
and
need people to go all the
some of
way
that
with
weird
certain
stuff is so
movies.
wildly hilarious.
Yeah.
It's so like, I mean, there were
Mhm.
scenes in that movie that I was gasping for breath, where I was like,
Mhm.
my God, who came up with this?
Right.
Brilliant. It was brilliant.
But for me
Brilliant.
personally, this is just me. What do I know? It won Best Picture. It is kind of nice to see things that John Waters did years ago that was just considered obscenities become part of modern art so much that the Academy gives it a Best Picture winner. But just for myself, if you have to pixelate it, should you even put it in the movie? Do you have to go
Well,
that crude? Does it limit your audience? Or am I the old man now? Right? Because there's so many things that, when we were kids were normal to us that the older generation's like, oh my God. And so have we got to the point where random dildo insertion and best picture winners is the norm? No. Did Borat and Jackass get us to this point? Did the war against the MPAA get us to this
oh my
point?
goodness.
Because once
Well,
the precedent was set with the Jackass movie that you could basically,
yeah.
take a dump on screen and get an R rating because it's Paramount, then, you can do whatever you want.
Get away with anything, damn near knows. Yeah.
But
I
how
mean,
many movies do you see that are pixelated?
I maybe that's
I'm glad it was pixelated, sir.
I
I'm
think
just
I
saying
think
it
it's
was
I
just
think that it's
an odd
pixelated also
thought.
for the comedy angle of
That's
it
true.
too.
I know. I know.
It being pixelated makes it funnier, in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes it more memorable.
Yeah. So that was up against Top Gun Maverick, Elvis, Tar, The Fablemans, Women Talking, The Banshees of Inisherin,
I
All Quiet on the
guarantee you
Western
there's no
Front,
dildos in those films.
Avatar, and The
That's why
Triangle
it
of
won.
Sadness. The only thing I could see that was better, I saw most of these. I didn't see The Banshees of Inisherin. I've heard it's great. I saw Elvis. I saw Fablemans. I saw Top Gun Maverick, Women Talking, Avatar: Way of Water. Um, I'm not watching All's Quiet on the Western Front again. I'm not going to do it. The only thing I thought that possibly was better was Tar, which
Mm.
I thought was a fantastic film. So I think to me just it and again, like La La Land, like you said, everything is done in such a freaking creative way.
Yeah, yeah.
There's not a throwaway shot in the movie.
No,
Nothing is mundane,
it
and
all
if it is
fits.
mundane, it's mundane for a reason. There's
Yeah, they're doing
storytelling
it. They're
around it.
doing it very specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, everything is done with intent in the
Mhm.
film, and it's just really well made.
What's it rated? It's got to be
Uh,
R. It's got to be R,
I
right?
believe it's rated R.
Just because its content's so over the top, that can't possibly be a PG-13.
Nah, I wouldn't
Or I
say.
am completely out of touch. If that's PG-13, then we have made some progress. Let's put it that way.
There's no way. Oh wait, yeah, it's R rated. Two
Okay.
hours and 19 minutes. It's R rated. Yeah.
So I only have a couple more things to say about this one. My typical complaint of part one, part two. I'm like, oh God, here we go again. It's not a book, it's a movie. Please don't write part one, chapter one. That's going to be my get off my lawn old man thing every time it comes up. It's just me. It doesn't mean the
Yeah,
movie's
it doesn't bug
bad
me.
or it takes
It
away
doesn't bug
from it.
me.
It's just my thing.
I hear you. I hear you.
Also, one of the different things that she flips into at one point was the Red Room from Twin Peaks, which was kind of a nice
Yeah.
little Easter egg in there. God knows how
Yeah.
many other things are in there that you can't
Oh
catch.
yeah, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's probably a whole website devoted to it.
Fight
Probably.
Club fast.
Yeah. So, what do you rate it?
That was Everything Everywhere All at Once, a movie that I now know the title of because I was confused as to what it was called until I had to sit down and actually watch it. Everything, Everywhere, All
All
at Once. The at's not capitalized.
no.
I am going to give it 3 stars for its sheer existence. That it's like, wow, that's uh, like I said, it's not made for me. I understand why it gets all its acclaim, but there's a lot of Best Picture winners that you go back to and you go, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still everybody should watch it. I'm glad I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
it's an important movie of its time. It makes me even happier about our most recent movie because I'm like, oh, how funny that we put our movie out the same year as this movie, and we explored weird
Weird
other
things.
thing
Yeah.
meta themes, and it's like, well, that's good timing. I
I
like it.
I liked it. Um, I don't really probably shouldn't rate a movie on its rewatchability. I don't.
Oh,
It's
that's
not
all
like you. It's
arbitrary here on this
yeah,
pod.
like you. It's probably not something that I'm going to be coming back to. But if it's on, like if I'm stuck somewhere and it's on, I'm not going to be unhappy about that. I'll be like,
Yeah,
oh,
you're
cool.
probably
Okay,
gonna
this is
finish it.
at least I'm stuck here with a good movie. So I'd say, yeah, I'd say three is probably about. I'd say maybe 3.5.
Alright.
I just think it's a really creative, funny, well-made movie. For 14 million, they really pulled something off, in my opinion. Because you figure, at 14, it's probably what hard cash, what 8, 10, something like that. To actually make the movie 8,
Oh yeah, yeah.
something
You're
like that.
you're paying your main actors. Your cast is pretty limited,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, this is a little side thing about you. You made me remember as like a, well, we don't want to, and you might even want to cut this out. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's a joke. It's a podcast. It's also true. You don't want to cast the same people as different things in a different place. It'll be confusing to the audience. Well, maybe back when, but who knows? We could have made everything everywhere Jean all at once. Remember
So
we
there you
wanted
go.
that we wanted to have the actors play all the different parts and all the. It's not a new idea, right?
No,
It's a new
but
idea.
but also, it's a smart idea. That's why you can do it for 14 million, because you're just jumping worlds to the same people in different scenarios and different realities, right? It's a great form of actor recycling.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow, our most intellectual film so far to
Yes,
date, I would say.
yes,
So up
yes.
next
Very
is
intellectual.
a film that I didn't have to write a whole lot down for because as well as oh, hello, I'm Marty and this is Cliff, we're the host of the show. Both of us have been living with this next film since the moment it pretty much came out. Now, I did not
Yeah,
see it in theaters, but I
I
saw
did.
it on cable over and
Yeah,
over. Somewhere I'm
yep,
still watching it right now,
yep.
syncing it
Yeah,
up for New Year's Eve. Yes.
I saw it in a theater, and it actually there's very few comedies that you go to where the entire theater is just kind of gasping for breath. They can't
Hmm.
stop laughing. And it's just one joke. And this thing, like, it's got a great story.
And
It's
this movie
solid.
is called When Harry Met Sally from 1989, directed by
That's
Rob
right.
Reiner.
Yep. Directed by Rob Reiner. So it's a solid film. But like again, when I saw it in the theater, I just remember thinking, damn, it's like City Slickers. When I saw City Slickers in the theater, it was the same thing. People were literally rolling in the friggin' aisles over that movie. It was
Hmm.
that funny. Maybe we'll come do that one at some point. But yeah, this was when Rob Reiner could do no wrong.
Well,
Everything the dude touched.
yeah.
This is before Nora Ephron. She's an associate producer on the film.
Hmm.
So, but she went on to make these kind of movies
Yeah.
basically her career.
Yeah.
Like she made these rom com kind of female driven
Is this the Meg
movies.
Ryan prototype?
I think so. I
Yeah.
really do. Yeah, I think because after this it's Sleepless, and then
Mhm.
you've got Mail. Um, is she in both of those?
Yeah. Yeah.
She,
Those are the
she,
two Tom Hanks ones. Yeah.
yeah. Um, you know, it's launched. I think it also launched Harry Connick Jr.'s career, but
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's. I remember when I put it on and sat down to watch it, I immediately went. It was like, oh yeah, okay, this film. Like, all right,
Hmm.
cool. And it still got me. Like, there are still a couple of points where it got me. It got me laughing. You know, um, it's a good movie. It's the script is so good. That script
Mm-hmm.
is so good. It's solid. There are no holes in it. There's no logic holes. There's no everything makes sense. You know, they I love how they, you talk about chapter. I don't like when it says chapter 1, chapter 2. They kind of almost could have done that because they could have said, first meeting, second meeting.
Oh, see, I
But
like what they do here. They show us the year,
they show us
and then
yeah,
they say 5 years later, and
yeah,
then 5 years later again. So we know we've
right,
hit 87 and then going into
right.
88. So,
But at the same time, they use these old people's stories to kind of like
right,
make their own little chapters of stuff, right?
until they finally become the old people
Until they
story.
finally become the old people's story at the end,
Hmm.
right? Right away, the first thing I noticed and that kept happening is that everybody's got a gag, everybody's got a thing in the movie. Bruno Kirby's a writer who's obsessed with Jimmy Breslin. Carrie Fisher is dating that dude that she's like, he's never gonna leave. Nobody thinks he's gonna leave his wife for you, Um, Sally's basically like a kind of an OCD, you know, uh, with the ordering the food, and then Billy Crystal's just kind of like he's like a male slut, I guess, a fast talker, funny guy, but he's
Hmm.
also sleeping with anything that'll come in. And so they're kind of well defined characters right away. They have their shtick. And every scene's got like a gag. Every scene, there's something going on. There's some sort of gag happening.
Yeah,
Like at the football game when they're doing the wave and he's unburdening himself about his wife leaving him, and like he's just like, Jesus, that's terrible. And then here comes the wave and they sit back
right.
down.
Yeah.
There's always these sort of running gags in those scenes like that where Meg Ryan at the diner is like, I've had plenty of good
Hmm.
sex.
It's the interpretation I got out of it this time because when we watch the movies again for this pod, uh, I get this whole analytical approach to it where I hadn't before, and so
Mhm.
I start to analyze it a little bit, break it down, and
Yeah.
this time I realized this movie feels less like it's dialogue, but more like a series of routines about relationships,
Yeah.
right? And you get like, we're going to come over here, and now I'm going to tell the story about, oh, but what was different? Sometimes I change what I'm wearing. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And then we walk off the thing. It's a good little scene, but
It is.
they're
Yeah.
doing a little
It's
they're doing a little bit
it's
for
bit.
you,
Yeah, it's
you know.
bits.
And
It's a lot of
so
bits.
this time for me, it felt like there was not so much character development or a story about a couple. Like I felt like I didn't even really get to know these people. But I thought maybe that's not what the point of this movie is. This movie is a study in the tropes of relationships. Once
Uh-huh.
again, it's the base so we can
Yeah.
hang all this stuff
Yeah.
onto it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
like,
yeah,
that's
so you
why
can
Harry and Sally, we don't even really almost barely know what they do for a living or who they are or what they feel or anything.
right.
That's not
Right.
what this is. They're doing little routines for us about the foibles of relationships and how
Yeah.
real it
Yeah.
all stings.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
I'm like,
Nora
oh, okay,
Ephron
I
wrote
never
it,
caught that before.
and Nora Ephron wrote it, and I think she got a lot of those tropes in there.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off with a perfect one, which is, men and women can never be friends because the sex gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty, I mean, I can remember that trope being discussed quite a bit, and it still comes up. But, you
Yeah,
know,
and
uh,
almost like a couple stand-ups, they come out and they're going to do the routine about men and women can't be. Oh, what do you mean they can't be? And they go back and forth.
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like sometimes we kind of, it's like, oh, that must have inspired some of our writing in a way to this movie because
Well,
that's snippy.
yeah, it makes sense too. I mean, Billy Crystal's a
Routine-based.
comedian. It's at the
Oh
height
yeah,
of stand-up
he's
comedy.
flowing.
You
Yeah.
know, Evening at the Improv is huge on A&E and all that type of thing. There's stand-up comics are huge. I think this is right around the time that Seinfeld starts getting his stuff going.
Mm-hmm. Oh
So
yeah,
it's
89. Yeah.
89. So, um, yeah, I mean, right away it just starts really well. Like it just boom, it gets going and it doesn't let up. And it's a perfect length. It's a 90-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect 90-minute movie. And to me, I think, um, I also like how they echo the diner scene. Like you have the first diner scene where they meet,
Yeah, and I
and
thought,
he's
wait a minute, am I misremembering this? She doesn't fake an orgasm in 1977, and then
nope,
it doesn't happen that way. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, I thought I was
yeah.
having a
No, they
Mandela
go into
moment.
the diner and he's making fun of her, telling her that she's never had good sex, and he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Who have you had good sex with?" And she's like, "Sheldon." And he's like, "No, a guy named Sheldon is
Sheldon.
not going to give you good sex, right?" And then later they're still talking about it, but she's making fun of him because he's like, "Oh, every woman I've been with is has had an orgasm." She's like, "How do you know that?" He's like, "I know," and then she embarrasses him by doing the fake orgasm bit, right?
Hmm.
Which is, I mean, iconic. That scene right there, that's friggin' iconic.
Yeah, and
That
it's less. There's no realism to it. It's more like they're
like
doing
a
a
bit,
bit, right?
like a
Yeah.
bit. Yep, yep. Is this the best rom com ever made?
Well, it's one of them. I would have to do a whole series of, off the top of my head. I don't know what I like more personally. There's probably something
Yeah,
I'm not thinking of. I don't know.
yeah. I was thinking
Yeah.
about it and I was like, man, and this one kind of
It's
it
hard to
kind
do
of
this again, and they tried so many times, right? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if you want a clinic on comedy writing and especially romantic comedy
Yeah,
writing,
'cause they're hitting
you
all of the tropes.
you watch this movie. They're hitting all the
They
meet
take.
cute right at the beginning, the whole deal.
Hmm.
She's disgusted by him and horrified by him early on. And I also like that about the movie. It takes them a while to kind of get to the point where they even start to hang out together.
Oh yeah, by the time they start to become characters, the movie's almost over in a way.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
where they start to
It's like
actually fall for each other. Yeah.
it's like Kevin Smith got a big budget movie with a bunch of big budget actors, and to a certain extent, like the snappiness of the dialogue and the pattern
Mm-hmm.
went back and forth. I'm not talking more about the subject matter, but just this kind of
Oh yeah, yeah.
that fires back and forth really well.
How I was talking with a coworker. Uh, People in the '70s, uh, like TV stars, once their shows ended, a lot of them just disappeared. And then
Yeah,
TV stars in the '90s, after Friends and Seinfeld, would be like, oh, you could possibly go on to continue to have a career to this day and still be as relevant and prominent. But back then, it was harder. If you were Three's Company, you disappear. Not that John Ritter wasn't getting work, but where I'm going
right.
with this is Rob Reiner is a good example of breaking that mold because he was on All in the Family just as the actor,
Yeah,
and then he
yeah,
breaks out as a director and everything from
yeah.
Spinal Tap, Sure Thing on down. It's
Ron
crazy.
Howard. Ron Howard did the same thing.
Oh, Ron
He
Howard's
was
another
Opie,
example.
like a
Mhm. The
and then he
Roger
was of
Corman
course
connection.
on Happy Days too. So yeah,
Uh, at one point, I don't think I've ever noticed this before. Billy Crystal is reading a book in the movie because you know how he likes to turn to the last page and all that. Did you
yeah.
notice the one particular book that I'm going to talk about?
Uh, well, one of them was Misery by
One of
Stephen
them was
King.
Misery, and that movie is
Yeah,
directed by Rob Reiner, which I think
yeah,
might be the very next movie he directed after this. It's a weird little
possible.
Easter egg, right?
That is
It
a
is a
weird little
Castle
Easter egg.
Rock picture.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So for those of you out there, Castle Rock Films, whenever you see that logo, that's Stephen King's production film, right? He has something, or production company, right? Because Castle Rock is because of
I'm
Stand
not
by Me,
sure
right?
about that. I mean, Castle Rock is definitely from his books, and I think,
Because of Stand
um,
by Me, I think another Rob Reiner classic.
yeah,
I could be misremembering.
it was, yeah, it was founded by Rob Reiner, um, Martin Schaefer. Yeah, so I don't. King doesn't really have anything to do with it.
Oh, it doesn't
So
have anything to do with it, but its name wouldn't exist without the fictional town of Castle Rock,
yeah, absolutely.
of which is Stand by Me set in Castle Rock?
I believe so.
Because I know some of his stories are Boulder, Colorado, but most of his things are, and of course, there's also Derry, but that's where it happens.
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Castle Rock is where
Oh,
Stand By Me is.
hmm. So, is Castle Rock Pictures a thing anymore, or did that fold?
I think they got bought.
Yeah, because we used to see
Well,
that
no, they
logo all the time. Yeah.
now Warner Brothers 1996 to the present. So it's
Ah,
the Rob and Michelle Reiner signed a deal in May of 2020 and relaunched the company.
wow.
So television division company revived with a $175 million film fund. Good Lord. Well, Castle Rock did Seinfeld, so that's not surprising.
Ah, see, all around that same time.
Yeah.
My only other note, I mean, obviously I have more to say about the movie, but the only other thing that I wrote down was don't fuck with Mr. Zero.
Don't fuck with Mr. Zero. I
I
wrote
wanted to
I
write
wrote
down the
down
exact quote. Yeah.
I wrote down you made a woman meow. Uh,
Yes, that's in the
that
trailer.
was
Yeah.
that was my fuck. That's one of my favorite lines in the whole thing.
Mhm.
Because he just once he hears that line, he completely forgets where he is, and he's just staring at him like he can't believe.
Mhm.
They're in the batting cages, the balls are whizzing by, and he's like, "You made a woman meow." Yeah, that's hilarious.
You know, about an hour into the movie or so, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, way overthinking this movie I've seen too many times at this point, going, do these people work?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then they start talking about what their careers are, and then I think, well, I can see why some people might not like this movie. As you could look at these fucking privileged motherfuckers, rich fucking New York motherfuckers.
I thought that
No offense to
yeah,
our New York listeners,
I,
I'm talking about a movie from 1989 and one person's possible interpretation of it, not mine.
the dialogue, it even though it's bits, it feels like genuine dialogue to a certain extent.
Oh yeah,
Like
it
like
goes back and forth very well. Uh-huh.
yeah, and part of me wonders if Carrie Fisher had any ghost writing on the
Oh,
film
well,
since she
you
was
know
in
she
it,
probably did.
polishing that stuff up. She's really good at that. So
Now, as at the time of
and
this recording, I've never seen the film Pillow Talk, but I know from the trailer or images I've seen, isn't that where they do that, like that split screen where one person's on the
yeah,
phone here and here? Now, and when Harry Met Sally's doing that, so they're paying
yeah,
homage to that. I've also
yeah.
heard criticisms that this is more of a Woody Allen ripoff, but see, I never saw Manhattan or what's his other one, Annie Hall,
Annie
because by
Hall.
the time I went to watch them, his scandal happened, and it was kind of like, oh, I can't really separate the artist from the art, and I never went back to it. So
Uh,
those are gaps. So I don't know if that is a proper criticism or not.
I haven't enjoyed anything by Woody in a long time.
Yeah. So I don't know. Just pointing out, some of the articles I read about this film,
Mm-mm. That's
poking
interesting.
around on the internet.
Um, it's interesting that Harry, you don't agree with Harry throughout much of the movie. You think he's kind of like I mean, yes, men and women could be friends. The sex doesn't always get in the way of that.
Well, of course, he's in different
Um,
stages of his life, right? That's what I'm
right,
watching it
right.
now, going, "Oh, he's still
But
in his. They're
but
still
when
young, they don't understand."
but when he finally has sex with Sally, it damn near ruins their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like it I mean it it damn near ruins their friendship.
Because the story won't
So he's
make
kind
sense,
of right.
right?
Yeah.
Because we've already established in the story that he runs out after. So of course, that Chekhov's gun is going to have to pay off when they finally do. So then we can have our second New Year's. That's the one you're supposed to time it to, the second New Year's,
Second New
and then
Year's,
he
yes.
shows up then, and
Yes. Yeah. Um yeah, I like how they slowly become friends. It takes years and then it takes their lives being in a certain place before they can even like both of them
mm-hmm,
are basically coming off of failed relationships when they kind of find each other and lean on each other for support,
mm-hmm,
and that's how they become friends. Um I kind of like that. It's
yeah,
I like the way it's written. I thought Nora Ephron did a really good
mm-hmm,
job. Um, I wonder if it, again, I wonder if it was ghost written or polished at all.
yeah,
Because I'm not trying to take credit away from her, but it's just really a sharp ass movie.
mm-hmm,
The dialogue is sharp. Some of
yeah.
that stuff is hilarious. The white man's overbite. That's a great line. The
That's
movie's got
I
all these great
to
lines
me.
in it.
Now I have no idea, but to me, I feel like that's just Billy Crystal made that shit up right there.
Yeah,
It felt that
and
he makes it feel
how much
that
of it is Crystal just riffing?
if I found out that was scripted, I'd be like, damn,
Yeah,
you
right. Like
really sold that as like that. That just seemed like you were making shit up. Yeah,
mm-mm,
and
mm-mm,
as you know, we know that you don't just make shit up a lot of the time, but that just wow.
mm-mm.
Small
It's like
cast too.
that's what I'm talking about. It's sharp. It's it's firing constantly at
Mhm.
you, just bang, 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 bang. Here's something funny. Here's something funny. Here's something funny. Here's something funny.
Yeah, there's only like what, four cast members for the most part. I mean, there's a few other background people, but it doesn't
Yeah,
focus on much.
yeah. It's the two leads, and then Carrie Fisher and Bruno are the perfect supports.
I mean, I guess where most of its money probably went to is because you got to remember this is 1989, right? So most
Yeah,
people had only seen New York in movies or on TV. So I get this feeling like they're like, we're gonna make it this tourist book of New York. And so as they're going through all the routines, they're on all these iconic eye candy places. And there's your movie. And also
yeah,
it does something very brilliant. They put their Christmas scene right in the middle.
yeah, yeah.
Always a good
Well,
thing.
it's a pretty movie too. I mean, they do make New York look good. You know, I've
Mm-hmm.
been to New York City, and there are parts of it that are very nice, but there are other parts that I wouldn't go anywhere near. So they definitely make it like the that one scene that you were talking about with I vary it. What do you vary? What I'm wearing. They're walking through that fall in Central Park, and it's gorgeous. Um, so this movie cost $2 million more than Everything Everywhere at Once cost in 1989 money,
Yeah.
which means it's $16 million in 1989 money is probably what, 40, 30,
For a crew,
32, maybe something now. I don't know.
bigger production, I would say.
I'm just in the terms of inflation dollars.
I mean, they even had to shoot at the ballpark for that one scene and shit, so I'm sure the dollars start to go up.
Yeah.
Everything was more confined. Oh, that
Well,
is
they had to
interesting.
film at Cat's Delicatessen. You know, yeah. So, hmm. Well, it looks August 30th to November 15th. They didn't take a long time to shoot it. It's like an 8-week shoot.
Wow. Well, it makes sense. It's mostly just two people talking to each other. And they were both on top of it, they had chemistry, so just.
Well, for a movie with two people just basically talking to each other through most of it. Oh, I did see a shot of the Twin Towers in it too, which was like, oh
Oh, yeah.
wow, look at that. I thought it was I liked it, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. I like if it's one of those ones where I'm just like, I've seen this a million times. I don't
Yeah,
need to see
right.
it again. Like I can watch that movie with my eyes closed. But yet, even rewatching it, I was like, I'd kind of forgotten
Mm-hmm.
that little bit, and
Yeah,
I'd forgotten
yeah.
that thing there. And
Like,
so,
last time I watched it was New Year's Eve last year, and now I watched it on like January 4th. So I was pretty
gotcha.
close with the. This is the first time I saw it in high def as well, so that was nice. Made it pop a little more.
I thought overall, I'm gonna have to say it's a 4-star movie.
All right.
That's a solid 4-star movie. It's a it's the blueprint for most rom-coms. It's probably better than most rom-coms will ever be.
Mm-hmm.
Just for a rewatchability factor, it's like My Cousin Vinny. You put that movie on, and it's not going to offend anybody. Almost anybody is not going to be offended by that movie, and it's got a rewatchability and enjoyability factor that continues to deliver every time you
Mm-hmm.
watch it. I think it's solid 4.
Yeah, yeah. I want to say 3.5. Since
Hmm.
we've introduced the halves, now it's alters because if we were still going by just whole numbers, I'd be at 4 as well. But since we've introduced the halves, I'll say 3.5.
Three
Which,
and a half.
by all
Okay.
means, it's like that's an excellent movie.
Yeah,
I
I think
do.
it's solid.
I always rate things personally, and it's like, oh, I've seen it so many times. I'm probably not putting it on anymore, but nothing beats.
But that's the
Wait,
that's the thing though.
waiter,
Like
I have put too much pepper in my paprikash.
in my gosh. But that's the thing about that movie. Even though you've seen it
Little
100
things that
times,
stick
it, it
forever. Yeah.
it starts. If you see it again, it doesn't offend.
Hmm.
You're not like, oh God, it's not tough to sit through at all.
No.
It's not tough to sit through that movie at
No.
all. No matter how many times you've seen it,
Hmm.
you can sit and enjoy the movie again. So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's that solid 4. I
My
would even lean towards 4.5, but
Yeah, my
that's
three
rare
and
for
a
me.
half instead of a 4 is because, and it's also like the other movie we watched this week. If they changed that, it wouldn't be the same movie. Where I realized this time, I'm like, oh, they're not really characters; they're just you know tropes doing sketches, which is what this movie is.
Hmm.
Because not every movie is ABC, nor should it be.
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm just
think
saying
that
it fell apart for me a little bit.
I think there was enough there to but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
But by all means, I'm saying it's still a good movie. I'm not saying it's not Dark Star
Well,
or something like.
no, not at all.
Ooh, why you gotta go there?
Well, then there you go. Everything, everywhere, all at once. I gave
Yeah.
it 3.5. You gave it 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then Harry Met Sally, I gave it 4. You gave it 3.5.
Yeah. Continuing our trend of Cliff either likes the movie a little bit more than me, or the rare occasion where I might champion something. Has that even happened?
I think so. I don't know, dude. I can't keep my day straight.
Somebody's
You know.
keeping track of this stuff somewhere. Check our Letterboxd page.
So what do you got for me next week?
Oh, do I say the movie first this time? Let's see.
Oh, I can't.
No, I do, right? No, because you said, and then I said that one, and then you said, oh, because I said that one, you said that one, so you go first.
Okay.
Yes, you got to spell it out for him.
I'm gonna give you. I've been thinking about it, and I think I'm gonna give you this one. This is, I believe, from the '90s, early '90s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let me check real quick before
He's gonna pick the movie I was gonna pick. Watch.
We're going away from. We're going away from the '80s for a bit because we've been there for a little bit.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Spoiler.
I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give you an excellent movie from 1997 called Gross Point Blank.
Oh, okay. We're introducing this one, and now this one is. It's been so long since I've seen it. It's almost like it's a blind pick, so that's cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I figured it's one that I watch. Every time it's on or I see it, I'm like, yeah, I'll sit down and watch that. So I'm interested to see what you think.
Cool. That's important to the podcast. It's also one of those movies that's ingrained itself in the Pondo lore somehow. Because what's the story? When was the last time you heard a really good rock soundtrack in a movie, and you guys went Gross Point
Gross
Blank?
Point Blank. Yeah.
The other
Geoff and I both at the
punchline
same
being
time.
Judgment Night, which is true, but that's just a callback to us having to sit through that movie. So your pick for next week is we're going all the way back to 1930. We haven't gone this far back in film yet. You're watching the Marx Brothers Animal Crackers.
Oh, okay. All
Oh, you
right.
should. You're gonna enjoy this. These are good, the good ones. I'm not throwing the weird ones at you. I'm throwing the bona fide classics. This one was re-released, I think, in the early '70s because it had it had disappeared for a while, and it became more of that cult college hit back then, the stoner movie of its time. And then Groucho was
Yeah,
like,
that's
"I don't understand these college kids getting stoned and watching our movies." But
yeah. There was a dude actually actually I've just read about that. There was a guy weird timing because I just read that on Twitter because I refuse to call it X. That the guy who led the charge on that, I think it was at USC or UCLA. I think USC
oh
though.
yeah.
He led the charge on that and really was trying to get those films re-released and Groucho came down and to support him and they had a whole thing. They did a screening of the film and Groucho was there and he ended up working for Groucho for years afterwards. That guy. That's how he met Groucho and got to work for him.
Yeah,
so that's kind of cool.
Going back to the basics of comedy so far back in the beginning of film that you're almost watching vaudeville being filmed. Like they didn't know anything yet.
I guess eventually we'll watch a Francis the Talking Mule movie. That's the height of the classic comedy.
Well, I don't have any intentions of throwing Stooges at you. But you're trying to keep it varied,
Animal Crackers it is.
Yeah. We have a nice HD copy of it now. We actually have a version that's uncensored because the censor board snipped a few seconds out back in the 30s, but those jokes that I can't even place in the movie are back where they are. There's no skip like Rocky Horror used to when we'd go see that every week.
Well, that was just because it was a terrible print. All right, Marty. Well, I'll watch Animal Crackers and you watch Gross Point Blank and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll see how those movies connect.
All right. All right. Talk to you next week, man.
Yes.
Later.